Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are we doing, guys? Law 5 in our series of the 48 Laws of Power. This is one of the least viewed streams and videos that I make, but one of the most appreciated videos and streams that I make. So I'm glad you guys who are watching are enjoying it, alhamdulillah, because there's a lot of benefit, a lot of beneficial knowledge to be taken from this book. Ilmun nafi'. I was actually with one of my friends yesterday. Shout out to you, Akhi. I'm gonna keep him anonymous for now. But Ilmun nafi', he was explaining to me, can be taken from anywhere. Muslims and Islam does not have a monopoly on knowledge. And this is something that really, alhamdulillah, we're proud of our religion, as we should be. But Muslims and Islam does not have a monopoly on knowledge. Period. All knowledge. It's like saying, I refuse to learn how to perform open heart surgery from the kafir professor because he's a kafir by virtue of his kufr. And Islam is enough. Islam is sufficient. Why do I need to learn how to perform open heart surgery from this kafir professor when we have Islam? That's how ridiculous you sound when you make these false equivalencies, or just silly statements. Full stop. Silly statements. So, ilmun nafi'. Now, this book is a dangerous book. It can be a dangerous book, and it certainly can be used for harm. Good. Now you know how to protect yourself from that harm. I've mentioned this before. Abdul Malik and Blackbeard, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Good to have you here. I've mentioned this before. If you hear something from this book that you don't like, and it's just outright evil, and there are those things in this book, good. Now you know how to protect yourself from said evil. Now you know what you must do to protect yourself from that evil. Why? Because best believe, trust and believe, there will be individuals who will use these tricks against you. 100%. Much of what's written in this book is beneficial in general, beneficial knowledge. That, and I mentioned before, this business of power. If power is a bad thing, then the mafhum al-mukhalafa, the opposite meaning, the opposite understanding must be that powerlessness is a good thing. This is nonsense. Power is a good thing so long as it is used in a good way or for good. And most of us do make needless mistakes that cost us our power, needlessly lose the power we already have. That's why I believe this book is so important to understand, particularly if you are what's the word I'm looking for? You're a high-powered executive, or you're a leader of an organization, whether it's a company, whether it's a masjid, whether it's a charity group, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. These power dynamics are always in play. You are always in court. The moment you are amongst other people, in a business setting, in a masjid setting, doesn't matter. In a setting, period, you're in court. You need to know how to be the courtier, the effective courtier. And the only way to do that is to understand power dynamics. And a lot of the stuff that you will learn in this book goes contrary to what you think you should do, your instinctive knee-jerk reaction. Yes, it goes contrary to your instinctive knee-jerk reactions. That's why it's so important to understand this. Abdurrahman Hijazi, I appreciate it, my man. Alhamdulillah. Okay, let's get straight into it because we've got Maghrib fast approaching. So let's get into this, inshallah. Law 5. So much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. Judgment. Reputation is the cornerstone of power. Through reputation alone, you can intimidate and win. Once it slips, however, you are vulnerable and will be attacked on all sides. Make your reputation unassailable. Always be alert to potential attacks and thwart them before they happen. Meanwhile, learn to destroy your enemy's reputation by opening holes. So learn to destroy your enemies by opening holes in their reputations. Then stand aside and let public opinion hang them. Here's an extremely sinister writing style, Robert Greene. You either love it or hate it. I find it to be very, very, it's seductive. His writing style is very seductive. Anyway, don't get too lost in it. Again, we have an observance of the law and a transgression of the law. Sometimes there is only an observance or a transgression, which is simply a story, an example from history of an individual who observed this law. During China's War of the Three Kingdoms, AD 207 to 265, the great general Zhuge Liang leading the forces of the Shu kingdom, dispatched his vast army to a distant camp, whilst he rested in a small town with a handful of soldiers. Suddenly, sentinels hurried in with the alarming news that an enemy force of over 150,000 troops under Sima Yi was approaching. With only 100 men to defend him, Chuko Liang's situation was hopeless. The enemy would finally capture this renowned leader. Without lamenting his fate or wasting time trying to figure out how he had been caught, Liang ordered his troops to take down their flags, open the city gates, and hide. I want you to pay attention here. He didn't try to bolster the defenses, add another layer of defense, maybe put some heavy furniture on the door. No, he opened the castle, opened it up completely. He himself then took a seat on the most visible part of the city's wall, wearing a Taoist robe. He lit some incense, strummed his lute, and began to chant. Minutes later, he could see the vast enemy approaching, an endless phalanx of soldiers. Pretending not to notice them, he continued to sing and play the lute. Soon the army stood at the town gates. At its head was Sima Yi, who instantly recognized the man on the wall. Even so, as his soldiers itched to enter the unguarded town, remember it was completely unguarded now, through its open gates, Sima Yi hesitated, held them back, and studied Liang on the wall. Then he ordered an immediate and speedy retreat. Interpretation. Chuko Liang was commonly known as the Sleeping Dragon. His exploits in the War of the Three Kingdoms were legendary. Once, a man claiming to be a disaffected enemy lieutenant came to his camp offering help and information. Liang instantly recognized the situation as a setup. This man was a false deserter and should be beheaded. At the last minute, though, as the axe was about to fall, Liang stopped the execution and offered to spare the man's life if he agreed to become a double agent. Grateful and terrified, the man agreed and began supplying false information to the enemy. Liang won battle after battle. On another occasion, Liang stole a military seal and created false documents dispatching his enemy's troops to distant locations. Once the troops had dispersed, he was able to capture 3 cities so that he controlled an entire corridor of the enemy's kingdom. He also once tricked the enemy into believing one of its best generals was a traitor, forcing the man to escape and join forces with Liang. The Sleeping Dragon carefully cultivated his reputation of being the cleverest man in China, one who always had a trick up his sleeve. As powerful as any weapon, this reputation struck fear into his enemy. Now, what was the reputation here? The reputation that he had garnered, that he had established for himself, was that he always had a plan. That was the reputation now. But you see, in the observance of the law and the story you just heard, he actually didn't have a plan. Once he opened the gates and strummed his lute and sat on top of the city, the gated wall, he was vulnerable. But what was he doing? He was calling their bluff and playing to his reputation. He knew that they knew that he always had a backup plan. But they happened to catch him on one occasion when he really did have no backup plan. But what did he do? He played into his reputation of always having a plan. What did Sima Yi do? Turn back with his 150,000 troops. Turn back. Turn around and left, even though that was his golden opportunity to strike. Sima Yi had fought against Chuko Liang dozens of times and knew him well. When he came on the empty city with Liang praying on the wall, he was stunned. The Taoist robes, the chanting, the incense, this had to be a game of intimidation. The man was obviously taunting him, daring him to walk into a trap. You see, Chuko Liang conveyed such an aura of confidence and nonchalance that Sima Yi believed that this was a trap, that Chuko Liang was luring him, daring him. Come, Ta'ala will show you. I have 300,000 men to slaughter you once you come in. That was the effect that it had on Sima Yi, even though it was patently untrue. The game was so obvious that for one moment it actually crossed Yi's mind that Liang actually was alone and desperate. But so great was his fear of Liang that he dared not risk finding out. Such is the power of reputation. It can put a vast army on the defensive, even force them into retreat without a single arrow being fired. Sima Yi and his 150,000 man strong troops turned around and left, based purely on the reputation of Zhuge Liang. Hit that like on your way in, guys, please. Don't forget to hit the like. 4. As Cicero says, even those who argue against fame still want the books they write against it to bear their name in the title and hope to become famous for despising it. The irony. Everything else is subject to barter. We will let our friends have our goods and our lives if need be. But a case of sharing our fame and making someone else the gift of our reputation is hardly to be found. Montaigne, 1533 to 1592. Observance of the law. Number 2. In 1841, the young P.T. Barnum, trying to establish his reputation as America's premier showman, decided to purchase the American Museum in Manhattan and turn it into a collection of curiosities that would secure his fame. The problem was that he had no money. The museum's asking price was $15,000, but Barnum was able to put together a proposal that appealed to the institution's owners, even though it replaced cash up front with dozens of guarantees and references. The owners came to a... Let's forget this, man. Right, there we go. The owners came to a verbal agreement with Barnum, but at the last minute, the principal partner changed his mind, and the museum and its collection were sold to the directors of Peale's Museum, his competitor. Barnum was infuriated, but the partner explained that business was business. The museum had been sold to Peale's because Peale's had a reputation and Barnum had none. Ibn Nawar and Vost, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Barnum immediately decided that if he had no reputation to bank on, his only recourse was to ruin the reputation of Peale's. Accordingly, he launched a letter-writing campaign in the newspapers, calling the owners a bunch of broken-down bank directors who had no idea how to run a museum or entertain people. He warned the public against buying Peale's stock, since the business's purchase of another museum would invariably spread its resources thin. The campaign was effective. The stock plummeted, and with no more confidence in Peale's track record and reputation, the owners of the American Museum reneged on their deal and sold the whole thing to Barnum. It took years for Peale's to recover, and they never forgot what Barnum had done. Mr. Peale himself decided to attack Barnum by building... Give me a second, guys. 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. Had to deal with some internal affairs there. Right, where was I? It took years for Peale's to recover his reputation, and they never forgot what Barnum had done. Mr. Peale himself decided to attack Barnum by building a reputation for highbrow entertainment, promoting his museum's programs as more scientific than those of his vulgar competitor. Mesmerism, hypnotism. This word mesmerism, it was actually, he's an individual. His name is something Mesmer. I can't remember his first name. He invented this crap where he would hypnotize people in these like colorful rooms with scents and all sorts and put them into a state of delirium. His name is Mesmer. It's where the term comes from. Anyway, we digress. So mesmerism or hypnotism was one of Peale's scientific attractions. And for a while, it drew big crowds and was quite successful. To fight back, Barnum decided to attack Peale's reputation yet again. Barnum organized a rival mesmeric performance in which he himself apparently put a little girl into a trance. Once she seemed to have fallen deeply under, he tried to hypnotize members of the audience. But no matter how hard he tried, none of the spectators fell under his spell, and many of them began to laugh. A frustrated Barnum finally announced to prove the little girl's trance was real, that he would cut off one of her fingers without her noticing. But as he sharpened the knife, the little girl's eyes popped open and she ran away to the audience's delight. He repeated this and other parodies for several weeks. It was intentional. Barnum wasn't actually trying to hypnotize anyone or put them under any type of spell, any type of mesmerism, any type of hypnotism. He wanted to make a mockery of the whole affair. What was the end result of that? This was the end result. Soon, no one could take Peale's show, his competitor, seriously, and attendance went way down. Within a few weeks, the show closed. Over the next few years, Barnum established a reputation for audacity and consummate showmanship that lasted his entire life. Peale's reputation, on the other hand, never recovered. Interpretation. Barnum used two different tactics to ruin Peale's reputation. The first was simple. He sowed doubts about the museum's stability and solvency. Doubt is a powerful weapon. Once you let it out of the bag with insidious rumors, your opponents are in a horrible dilemma. On the one hand, they can deny the rumors, even prove that you have slandered them. But a layer of suspicion will remain. Why are they defending themselves so desperately? Maybe the rumor has some truth to it. If, on the other hand, they take the high road and ignore you, the doubts, unrefuted, will be even stronger. If done correctly, the sowing of rumors can so infuriate and unsettle your rivals that in defending themselves, they will make numerous blunders. This is the perfect weapon for those who have no reputation of their own to work from. Let's talk about this for a moment. You've had a slander made about yourself. Some type of rumor has been spread about you. You're stuck on the horns of a dilemma. On the one hand, if you defend yourself, people will ask, why are you defending yourself if it's not true? Why are you working so hard to defend yourself if it's not true? For if it were not true, you wouldn't be this vexed, this bothered. But then on the other hand, if you say nothing, those doubts have the potential to escalate or to grow in size. So what should you do? What's the solution? There's no real solution here, not that I see anyway. Personally, I'd take the high road and go and stay silent. Why? Because if you acknowledge a petty problem, you give it credibility. If I say that again, if you acknowledge a petty problem, you give it credibility. Take the high road, leave it alone. I understand this is not a simple case of what's the solution or this, what's the cure here. This is simply a case of the lesser of the two evils. That's it. People are sowing seeds of doubt about you, trying to tarnish your reputation. Again, it depends on the severity of it and what they're saying, but let's let it go. Leave it be, because acknowledging it gives it credibility. Understand that. Once Barnum did have a reputation of his own, he used the second, gentler tactic, the fake hypnotism demonstration. He ridiculed his rival's reputation. This too was extremely successful. Once you have a solid base of respect, ridiculing your opponent both puts him on the defensive and draws more attention to you, enhancing your own reputation. Outright slander and insult are too strong at this point. They are ugly and may hurt you more than help you. But gentle barbs and mockery suggest that you have a strong enough sense of your own worth to enjoy a good laugh at your rival's expense. A humorous front can make you out as a harmless entertainer whilst poking holes in the reputation of your rival. Keys to power. The people around us, even our closest friends, will always to some extent remain mysterious and unfathomable. Their characters have secret recesses that they never reveal. The unknowableness of other people could prove disturbing if we thought about it long enough, since it would make it impossible for us to really judge other people. So we prefer to ignore this and to judge people on their appearances, on what is most visible to our eyes: clothes, gestures, words, actions. In the social realm, appearances are the barometer of almost all our judgments, and you must never be misled into believing otherwise. One false slip, one awkward or sudden change in your appearance can prove disastrous. This is the reason for the supreme importance of making and maintaining a reputation that is of your own creation. That reputation will protect you in the dangerous game of appearances, distracting the probing eyes of others from knowing what you are really like and giving you a degree of control over how the world judges you. A powerful position to be in. Reputation has a power like magic. With one stroke of its wand, it can double your strength. It can also send people scurrying away from you. Whether the exact same deed appears brilliant or dreadful can depend entirely on the reputation of the doer. Do you have a reputation for excellence? Do you have a reputation for mauling your opponents? In the case of Habib, for example, do you have a reputation for crushing your opponents? Or do you have a reputation for timidity? Do you have a reputation for failure? Do you understand? Whatever your reputation is, it will be compounded in the eyes of the masses each time you go at it again. That's the importance and power of reputation. You often hear boxers talk about how just before the fight starts, I knew he was going to lose the moment I looked into his eyes. They can sense that fear. They can smell it. They can sense it, smell it, feel it, just in the way that their opponent is talking. In the ancient Chinese court of the Wei Kingdom, I'm not even just talking, just looking, just how they look, appear. In the ancient Chinese court of the Wei Kingdom, there was a man named Mitsu Hisai, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who had a reputation for supreme civility and graciousness. He became the ruler's favorite. It was a law in Wei that whoever rides secretly in the ruler's coach shall have his feet cut off. But when Mitsu Hisai's mother fell ill, he used the royal coach to visit her, pretending that the ruler had given him permission. When the ruler found out, he said, "How dutiful is Mitsu Hisai! For his mother's sake, he even forgot that he was committing a crime, making him liable to lose his feet." Another time, the two of them took a stroll in an orchard. Mitsu Hisai began eating a peach that he could not finish, and he gave the ruler the other half to eat. The ruler remarked, "You love me so much that you would even forget your own saliva taste and let me eat the rest of the peach." And I want you to pay attention here. And he's going to get to it in a second. He could have interpreted that as, "You're giving me your leftovers." But no, because Mitsu Hisai had a reputation, a particular reputation for graciousness, the ruler interpreted that as, "Wow, he's given me something that he really wanted. That's how gracious he is." Purely back off the basis of his reputation. Later, however, envious fellow courtiers spread word that Mitsu Hisai was actually devious and arrogant, and they succeeded in damaging his reputation. The ruler came to see his actions in a new light. "This fellow once rode in my coach under pretense of my order," he told the courtiers angrily. "And another time he gave me a half-eaten peach." For the same actions that had charmed the ruler, or that had once charmed the ruler when he was the favorite, Mitsu Hisai now had to suffer the penalties. The fate of his feet depended solely on the strength of his reputation. In the beginning, you must work to establish a reputation for one outstanding quality. One thing and one thing alone. Be it generosity or honesty or cunning. This quality sets you apart and gets other people to talk about you. And the more I read about people who have succeeded in their respective fields, the more I hear the same narrative come back over and over and over. The most successful people narrow down their list of things to do. Narrow down, not expand, narrow down their expertise. They become super proficient and irreplaceable in one tiny thing, tiny niche. I was listening to a book yesterday by Darren Hardy. It's called The Entrepreneurial Roller Coaster. And he was talking about a heart surgeon that he interviewed. And this heart surgeon does 250 open heart surgeries a year. 250 a year. And he has his own TV series on top of that as well. Darren Hardy said to him, "How on earth do you do 250 open heart surgeries a year with all your other commitments?" You know what he said? His response was very telling. He said, "I don't prepare the equipment. I don't put the patient to sleep. I don't even open up his chest. And much of the work of the procedure is already done by the time I arrive. When I arrive, I do one thing. I walk in, sterilize my hands, put my gloves and my clothes on, and I do this one bit of the operation that very few people in the world can do. I happen to be one of just a handful of people on this planet who can do it. I finish it in a very short period of time, and I walk away. I don't close up the chest. I don't even connect the other bits and bobs, whatever it is, to the heart. My biology guys out there, you know what I'm talking about. I don't do none of that. My team takes care of that. I come in. I do the one thing that I am known for, that I have a reputation for being excellent at, and I bounce. I'm gone. I'm out. I leave the man there with his chest open, his heart sticking out. And the one common theme that comes up over and over and over is the more successful an individual becomes in their respective field, the more they narrow down into a tiny niche. Are there exceptions to the rule? Yes, there are exceptions to the rule. Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, was known to be proficient in many different areas, but those really are exceptions to the rule. Leonardo da Vinci is another example of someone who was, he had expertise in multiple different areas, not just in art, but in geography and engineering, mechanics. But that's rare. That's very, very, very rare. For the most part, that type of genius, that's an exception. You want to become exceptional at what you do, you have to learn to become great at one tiny niche thing and develop a reputation for it. That's how you establish yourself. One thing and a reputation for that one thing. Not 10 things, not 50, no, one. One thing or one thing only. Noril, I'm glad you're appreciating the series, my man. Appreciate it, yeah? Let's carry on. A solid reputation increases your presence and exaggerates your strengths without your having to spend much energy. It can also create an aura around you that will instill respect, even fear. In the fighting in the North African desert during World War II, the German general Erwin Rommel had a reputation for cunning and for deceptive maneuvering that struck terror into everyone who faced him, even when his forces were depleted and when British tanks outnumbered his by 5-1. Entire cities would be evacuated at the news of his approach. Entire cities, even though he was outnumbered 5-1. As they say, your reputation inevitably precedes you, and if it inspires respect, a lot of your work is done for you before you arrive on the scene or utter a single word. Your success seems destined by your past triumphs. Much of the success of Henry Kissinger's shuttle diplomacy rested on his reputation for ironing out differences. Henry Kissinger was the Richard Nixon's right-hand man. Richard Nixon was president of America, I believe, 1968 to 1972. I don't remember if he went for a second term or not. But that's who Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger's still alive, fam. He's like 2,000 years old. No, about 98 or something like that. Oops. Okay. Nobody wanted to seem as so unreasonable that not even Kissinger could sway him. A peace treaty seemed a fait accompli as soon as Kissinger's name became involved in the negotiations. Make your reputation simple and base it on one sterling quality. This single quality, efficiency say, or seductiveness, becomes a kind of calling card that announces your presence and places others under a spell. A reputation for honesty will allow you to practice all manner of deception. Yes. Pay attention now. Casanova used his reputation as a great seducer to pave the way for his future conquests. Women who had heard of his powers became immensely curious and wanted to discover for themselves what had made him so romantically successful. The irony. There is some truth in women having an affinity and attraction to men who, well, in the non-Muslim world, who have had many conquests, or amongst the Muslims, men who have multiple wives. Oftentimes, and it's a strange irony, men who have one, two, three, okay, let's leave it at three, 2 or 3 wives are more appealing to women than a man who's not married at all. Why? Proof of concept. What's so amazing about this man that he's been able to marry and keep 3 women? There must be something special about him, even if there isn't. That's the reputation that he has garnered because he's got multiple women on his roster and they seem to be hanging about. They seem to be staying. So maybe I should sign up to his club as well. He's only got 1 place left. Maybe I need to get in there quickly. Perhaps you have already stained your reputation so that you are prevented from establishing a new one. In such cases, it is wise to associate with someone whose image counteracts your own, using their good name to whitewash and elevate yours, the halo effect. It is hard, for example, to erase a reputation for dishonesty by yourself, but a paragon of honesty can help. When P.T. Barnum wanted to clean up a reputation for promoting vulgar entertainment, he brought the singer Jenny Lind over from Europe. She had a stellar, high-class reputation, and the American tour Barnum sponsored for her greatly enhanced is his own image, the halo effect. That's what the halo effect is. If you are seen with super successful people, even if you are not successful yourself, people will assume that you must be successful. If you are seen with crack addicts and junkies, even if you're not a junkie, the immediate presumption, even if it might be wrong, is that, well, you must be a junkie then. The halo effect. It swings both ways. Similarly, the great robber barons of 19th century America were long unable to rid themselves of a reputation for cruelty and mean-spiritedness. Only when they began collecting art, so that the names of Morgan and Frick became permanently associated with those of Da Vinci and Rembrandt, were they able to soften their unpleasant image. By the way, just give you guys a quick insight insight here. What rich people often do is, because they've got so much surplus money and they don't want to give it to charity, they don't want to pay taxes on it. What they'll do is they'll set up an art gallery, and they will spend millions on buying very expensive pieces of art. But if they take those pieces of art home, then that money that they spent on that art is still liable to be taxed. But if they create this art gallery in the name of public interest, we're doing this for the public, they kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They avoid paying tax because this is an asset to society, supposedly. And number 2, they still get the art that they wanted. Fine, they couldn't hang it in their home, but they still got it. It's a runaround paying taxes. Reputation is a treasure to be carefully collected and hoarded, especially when you are first establishing it. You must protect it strictly, anticipating all attacks on it. Once it is solid, do not let yourself get angry or defensive at the slanderous comments of your enemies. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier. If you show anger and emotion of some sort, people will wonder, why is it making you emotional, bro? I thought it's not true. If it's not true, why are you getting emotional? And that reveals insecurity, not confidence in your reputation. Take the high road instead and never appear desperate in your self-defense. On the other hand, an attack on another man's reputation is a potent weapon, particularly when you have less power than he does. He has much more to lose in such a battle, and your own, thus far, small reputation gives him a small target when he tries to return your fire. Barnum used such campaigns to great effect in his early career, but this tactic must be practiced with skill. You must not seem to engage in petty vengeance. If you do not break your enemy's reputation cleverly, you will inadvertently ruin your own. Thomas Edison, considered the inventor who harnessed electricity, of which he wasn't, by the way, we'll get to that in a moment, believed that a workable system would have to be based. Thomas Edison was a businessman. That's the bottom line. I know he's credited with inventing electricity. Actually, he's a very clever businessman who knew how to harness the skills of others, period. And that made him look like an extremely intelligent man. And we'll get to one of those laws as well. Never do yourself what you can have others do for you. It's one of the laws. We'll get to that. He was a clever man who knew how to orchestrate the skills of others and then take all the credit for it. So Thomas Edison, considered the inventor who harnessed electricity, believed that a workable system would have to be based on direct current, DC. When the Serbian scientist Nikola Tesla, sound familiar to you, Tesla? Yes, the word Tesla, the brand Tesla is taken from the Serbian scientist Nikola Tesla, appeared to have succeeded in creating a system based on alternating current, AC. You might have heard of AC/DC. Edison was furious. He determined to ruin Tesla's reputation by making the public believe that the AC system was inherently unsafe, and Tesla irresponsible in promoting it. Why? Because the AC current is a much more powerful current than DC current. To this end, he captured all kinds of household pets and electrocuted them to death with an AC current. When this wasn't enough, in 1890, he got New York State prison authorities to organize the world's first execution by electrocution using an AC current. Imagine, look, the Thomas Edison that is celebrated in history. He is the guy who organized the first execution via electrocution. Bit of a tongue twister there. The first execution via electrocution. He was the one who organized it. Why? Just to prove his point. But Edison's electrocution experiments had all been with small creatures. The charge was too weak, and the man was only half killed. In perhaps the country's cruelest state-authorized execution, the procedure had to be repeated. It was an awful spectacle. Although in the long run, it is Edison's name that has survived, at the time, his campaign damaged his own reputation more than Tesla's. He backed off. The lesson is simple. Never go too far in attacks like this, for that will draw more attention to your own vengefulness, you see, and the spite and bitterness, and people don't like that, than to the person you are slandering. It backfires. When your own reputation is solid, use subtler tactics, such as satire and ridicule, to weaken your opponent while making you out as a charming rogue. The mighty lion toys with the mouse that crosses his path. One moment, guys. We have a screaming baby in the background. The mighty lion toys with the mouse that crosses his path. Any other reaction would mar his fearsome reputation. You see, if the mighty lion got all up and angered and furious and charged at the mouse, people will be wondering, fam, I thought you were a lion, and that, like, what's this big exertion of energy to kill a mouse? What a great analogy. Brilliant analogy. Any other reaction would mar his fearsome reputation. And now we've come to the end of that law. As you know, there's always an image to help remind you of what the law is. And the image here is a mine full of diamonds and rubies. You dug for it, you found it, and your wealth is now assured. Guard it with your life. Robbers and thieves will appear from all sides. Never take your wealth for granted and constantly renew it. Time will diminish the jewel's luster and bury them from sight. Authority. Therefore, I should wish our courtier to bolster up his inherent worth with skill and cunning, and ensure that whenever he has to go where he is a stranger, he is preceded by a good reputation. For the fame which appears to rest on the opinions of many fosters a certain unshakable belief in a man's worth, which is then easily strengthened in minds already thus disposed and prepared. Baldassar Castiglione. What is that? That's a very profound statement. I'm going to read the last part again. When you have a great reputation that precedes you, the soil in the mind of the people you are about to approach has already been softened up and prepared. They're expecting you to be great. Therefore, when you come to perform, it feels like you are great. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. They've done some research, connected these like electric stuff to measure the electrical activity in the brain, when they offered participants two types of wine. The first type of wine, the participants were told this is a cheap wine, like $10 bottle. The second type of wine, they were told this is an expensive wine, $100 bottle. Both wines were $10 bottles. It was the exact same wine. But what happened to the electrical activity in the brain? When the participants drank the $10 wine, the electrical activity in the brain was like normal. When the participants drank the $100 wine, the electrical activity in the brain was similar to that when individuals have actually experienced some type of luxury or bought some type of luxury item or experience. What's the point I'm making here? Their mind was predisposed to believe that they are about to consume luxury, and the appropriate firing in the brain thus took place. Even though it wasn't luxury, even though it was a placebo, even though it was the regular wine, your reputation precedes you in the exact same way. It predisposes the minds of the people you are about to approach to believe that you're actually going to perform right now. And even if you underperform, it still feels like that you actually had a great performance. That's how important reputation is. Reversal to this law. There is no possible reversal. Reputation is critical. There are no exceptions. Perhaps not caring what others think of you, you gain a reputation for insolence, but that can be a valuable image in itself. Oscar Wilde used it to great advantage. Since we must live in society and must depend on the opinions of others, there is nothing to be gained by neglecting your reputation. By not caring how you are perceived, you let others decide this for you. Be the master of your own fate and also of your reputation. That's the end of that chapter, ladies and gentlemen. Very powerful, very powerful. I hope you appreciated that. I hope that was beneficial. Barakallahu feekum. We will continue with Law 6 next week, and I forget what Law 6 is now. But if you enjoyed this, please like the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. And I'll catch you guys next week, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.